Hello. Welcome to an adventure. I do this show. My name is something. It has been a day. Welcome. I'm Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, also known in parts of the internet as Rogan27. So this is Archival Adventures, a show that I do on Wednesdays, weekly, sharing materials from community, sharing collections from special collections and university archives here at Virginia Tech. And thank you all for joining me. You may be here on one of two channels, either twitch.tv/VTUL Studios or twitch.tv/Rogan27. You're welcome to join in the chat on either channel and, have fun. If you see something interesting and you want to make a comment about it, go ahead, as long as it's within the rules that you had to agree to when you clicked into the chat. So it is the last Wednesday of August. And since the beginning of this year, the last Wednesday of each month has been our high energy physics series. We did miss one in, I think it was July. It might have been end of June. Either the end of June or the end of July, I took off a number of weeks from doing the show because there were other work things to do. And so I think we will end up with 11, possibly just 10 episodes of the High Energy Physics series this calendar year. But, it was the end of June that there was no High Energy Physics. The end of July, we looked at the press kit for the nuclear ship Savannah, the first ever nuclear-powered merchant vessel. And the press kit was so interesting, we didn't really get to anything else. So this month, we're going to look at more stuff about the nuclear ship Savannah, because there is more in this collection, and it's really interesting, and I think we're going to have a good time. Consilience, it is good to see you. Thank you so much for the resubscription. 29 months. And Lord Portico, welcome back. Thank you for the resubscription for 32 months. There is a finding aid. So if you want to look and see information about the collection that I will be sharing materials from today, you can go and look up this finding aid on Archival Resources of the Virginias. There is a convenient link in chat that will hopefully take you there. My best guess is that it will, but our finding aid links have had some issue lately. So if it doesn't work, let me know. So we're going to be looking at the John W. Landis papers, but specifically the materials about nuclear ship Savannah. And Landis, born in 1917, was educated at Lafayette College, the University of Rochester, and Princeton University. He worked for the U.S. Navy Department as a consultant in guided missiles and the Educational Testing Service and the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. Beginning in 1953, he was associated with Babcock and Wilcox in the field of nuclear engineering, and he was successively the head of customer relations, assistant manager and manager of the Atomic Energy Division, and later general manager of their Washington, D.C. operations. He died in March 2013, and among the papers that we have for him are a number of materials about nuclear ship Savannah, which was built by the ship's engine was built by Babcock and Wilcox while he was there. I believe it was while he was assistant manager, of their atomic energy division. So he was working as a manager in the atomic energy division of the company that was building the nuclear engine for this ship. So we have a bunch of stuff related to the development of this nuclear ship. Yeah, so if you see anything listed in there that jumps out and it's about the Savannah and you're like, I want to see this, let me know in chat and I will make sure that we look at it together on stream. Otherwise, let's get this stream rolling with a glance at the land acknowledgement and labor recognition for Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tudelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in Western territories. We understand that honoring Native peoples without explicit material commitments falls short of our institutional responsibilities. Through sustained, transparent, and meaningful engagement with the Tudelo and Monacan peoples and other Native nations, we commit to changing the trajectory of Virginia Tech's history by increasing Indigenous student, staff, and faculty recruitment and retention, diversifying course offerings, and meeting the growing needs of all Virginia tribes and supporting their sovereignty. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations, owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. We acknowledge that enslaved black people generated wealth that financed the predecessor institution to Virginia Tech, the Preston and Olin Institute. And they also worked on construction of its building. Not until 1953, however, was the first black student permitted to enroll. Through inclusive VT, the institutional and individual commitment to prosim, that I may serve, in the spirit of community, diversity, and excellence, we commit to advancing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So, let's start looking at some of these documents. I'm not 100% certain where we're going to start, but we're going to find something to look at. And it'll be about a nuclear ship. Let's see. Oh, there's a thing. Yeah. I may have made notes saying, oh, these are some of the interesting things that you might want to look at. I may have forgotten I made those notes. The first thing I want to look at, and so as we're looking at these things, you might notice that the items are not in the same kinds of folders as we normally see on stream. And that is because while there is a finding aid, if you read the notes at the top of the finding aid, you will see this collection is not fully processed. This collection has had basically no processing. And so this folder may or may not be something that would be retained. Most likely it would be removed and replaced with an acid-free, nice little like manila color folder. I don't know for certain and would have to test to see if this was acid-free. I suspect it's not, because if you see there's discoloration at the edges, there's a little bit of yellowing at the edges of the blue folder, which tells me it's probably not acid-free, in which case we would want to move the materials. But this folder is labeled Eisenhower Atoms for Peace Program, which is directly related, and without this program, this ship would not have been built. And so in this folder being a folder of materials collected by Landis, in this folder we've got a magazine here, The Reporter. I'm not familiar with The Reporter, but you can see this is January 12th, 1956. It was 25 cents for the issue. Ike and the Peaceful Atom. And I marked, there's an editorial in here by someone named Max Ascoli, A-S-C-O-L-I. I'm not going to read anywhere near this entire thing, but I thought it would be interesting to take a look and maybe read the beginning of this so that we learn a little bit about the program. We can poke at some of the other things in the folder maybe before we dive into some of the more like engineering focused items. The President and His Party. The article that follows shows Eisenhower the President at his best, an imaginative leader striving to live up to the expectations which the people of his own country and of the world have thrust upon him. At the same time, it reveals him as a chief executive, singularly patient whenever the exercise of his leadership is thwarted by men he himself has chosen. There may be causes for the discordance between the inspiring generosity of his ultimate aims, all related to the attainment of peace, and the shy, halting nature of the means he uses. Perhaps his military training so deeply impressed upon him the principle of civilian supremacy as to disincline him from disciplining any civilian official who may block his course, including those directly subordinate to him. Or perhaps his wartime experience has given him confidence that no matter how many troublesome Montgomerys there may be on his team, in the end he will prevail over them, honorable men all. Yet what has most affected the President's conduct in office is his decision 4 years ago to seek the Republican nomination. At that time, the military leader of the NATO coalition proclaimed himself a lifelong Republican and took upon himself the task of uniting and remaking his party. For this purpose, the President brought into office men like Radford, Dulles, or Strauss, representing Republican policies or traits he may not have particularly cherished. 4 years ago, Eisenhower gambled his success as president on the expectation that the GOP could be united and made fit to govern. Considering the risk he ran, it is remarkable that Eisenhower has succeeded in governing at all. I know it gets into the specifics of what I want here soon. I'll finish this paragraph and then we'll jump. Even during his first 2 years in office, before a Democratic majority in Congress came to his rescue, he had the vision to launch and pursue the He had the vision to launch and pursue the Atoms for Peace program. In furthering the end to which he is unreservedly dedicated, the prevention of war without the accretion of communist power, the President, in spite of all self-imposed handicaps, achieved a notable measure of success. His finest hour was at Geneva. There he impressed himself upon the hearts and minds of all men, as the most persuasive, trustworthy advocate of the principle he never tires of stating: in our times, there is no alternative to peace. The Geneva Summit Conference put an end to trench diplomacy and opened the way for a diplomacy of movement. Once before, Eisenhower had found himself in a somewhat similar situation after Bradley's army had won the grueling fight through Normandy's hedgerows. Then he knew what to do. He loosed Patton's fresh armored divisions. But after Geneva, there was no equivalent to Patton's drive in the conduct of American diplomacy. This may have been because of the fact that in 1955, he did not feel as secure and confident as when George Marshall, Henry Stimson, and Franklin Roosevelt stood above and by him. Or it may be because of the fact that shortly after Geneva, the President fell sick. Slowly yet irresistibly, the president's heart attack has made increasingly evident his party's disability, a disability that cannot be concealed by any professional handling of press relations. Okay, yeah, so sickness. I want Adams for Peace, though. I'm going to skip a little bit. Presidential election. Let's see. The next mention of it is here at the top. You know, I might have caught this from the big headings at the top. It's a continuation of the same part, but like on the left page was the president and his party. And then this one is Ike and the Peaceful Atom. I maybe could have caught that. Adams for Peace has become the one real crusade of General Dwight D. Eisenhower's period in the presidency. The pledge he made before the surprised General Assembly of the United Nations on December 8, 1953, a solemn promise that the moment our goodwill was matched, we would take uranium from our A-bomb stockpile and put it in a world bank where have-not neighbors could borrow it for their own peaceful purposes, is still remembered and cherished in the Earth's far places. No other act of the president has commanded such universal acceptance and acclaim, and singularly, nothing else that he has done so thoroughly typifies his own strongest personal traits, the fortitude of the soldier and the patience of the man of simple faith. At times alone, at best, with only the liberals of his party about him, always with Republican doubters and dissenters dragging out and slowing down the march, Eisenhower has slogged toward Adams for Peace. Through 2 dismaying years, stopping often for stragglers, until now, in the 25th month of his campaign, he is at last within sight of his objective. Who helped him? Who hindered him? How he mediated between them without once invoking the presidential power of political banishment? What led him, in the first place, to end the long period of doubt and hesitation that had accompanied the latter half of the Truman administration and the first quarter of his own? And finally, what caused him to appear before the UN to bespeak a new day for the atom-frightened world? All these together make up a case history of successful American improvisation against communist threat and duplicity, the triumph of American initiative over American caution, and the growth of American idealism from the roots of American practicality. Like the Marshall Plan before it, Adams for Peace sprang from strategic and psychological necessity. When President Eisenhower took office, the atomic armaments race had been going on for 4 years. The Russians had exploded their first A-bomb in 1949, and the president knew it would be only a matter of time before they duplicated the vastly more powerful hydrogen bomb we had set off late in 1952. The urgency and tension of waiting for that bigger Soviet bomb to drop were heightened by the death of Joseph Stalin barely 6 weeks after Eisenhower's term opened. Stalin had given every sign of indifference to the wholesale slaughter of atomic warfare. Would the new men in the Kremlin feel differently? And would they understand that atomic weapons had now ruled out any alternatives to peace? Within a few weeks after Stalin's death, Eisenhower put the question directly to the new rulers in the Kremlin. Is there, he asked in a speech in April 1953, a chance for a just peace? No one in Washington expected an answer so soon. Until one came, it was imperative to prepare the American people for the worst. Ever since 1950, the Pentagon had argued that the full truth about atomic holocausts should be told. It had to be made clear that we held no monopoly on atomic knowledge. President Truman had not accepted this military appraisal, at least not enough to act on it. President Eisenhower did accept it wholeheartedly, and sometime before or during the month of April 1953, he and the National Security Council agreed to reveal to the people here at home the facts about life in the H-bomb era. Let's see. I'm gonna see if there are other more specific details about Adams for Peace, because that is particularly what I'm interested in here. Let's see, Strauss, Atomic Energy Commission, Atomic Energy Act of 1946. Ah, yes, very important. When Strauss returned, let's see, no. Sorry, that's ahead of where I want to be. I want to be over here. Strauss was a member of the original Atomic Energy Commission, named in 1946 by President Truman. He was undoubtedly the most conservative of Truman's 5 appointees. He opposed his 4 colleagues on the very first international question that came before the commission in 1947. The issue was whether radioactive isotopes ought to be shipped to our friends abroad. One moment. Atomic scientists had pleaded for regular shipments in return for reports on experiments that would ensue. The scientists' reasoning was that the fissioning of uranium could not be obscured from the rest of the world for very long anyway. It was important, therefore, that we should have some open channel through which to learn of new atomic discoveries. Sorry. I have had so many things going on today. The Atomic Energy Act of 1946 permitted isotope shipments for research or development activity, medical therapy, industrial uses, or such other useful applications as may be developed. At the same time, the law specifically prohibited exchange of information with other nations with respect to the use of atomic energy for industrial purposes, until Congress declares by joint resolution that effective and enforceable international safeguards against the use of atomic energy for destructive purposes have been established. Strauss considered isotopes themselves to be a kind of information, or at least a possible source of information. He consequently interrupted the ban on information to cover isotopes, interpreted the ban on information to cover isotopes in all cases that might involve industry directly or indirectly. So, that is where things were. And trying to find the specifics about atoms for peace. There's a lot of info in here. It's just where specifically in the article is what we wanted. Like, this is an entire, like, written history of the global atomic situation from the end of Truman's presidency and into Eisenhower's. But the Atoms for Peace program is what specifically I want. Not jumping out to me anywhere else in this magazine article, but we have other sources. So let's try this one. This is from The News, Lynchburg, Virginia, December 25th, 1957. By Bem Price, U.S. aims at prestige abroad in harnessing atom for peace. The United States is spending millions on harnessing the atom to produce electrical power it doesn't need, and may not need for years to come. Not only that, the power thus produced costs 2 to 4 times as much as power obtained from conventional sources, such as water, coal, or oil. At this point, I'm not certain whether this author is in favor of or against. It could go either way with that introduction. Yet there is a strong probability that Congress in its next session will demand even more power from such uneconomic operations. The situation may seem to make little sense, but it is sharply related to the Cold War and whether people everywhere can be convinced that the United States, rather than Russia, is able to lead them to a better, more comfortable world. U.S. objectives in this race are twofold: to maintain scientific prestige abroad in developing the atom for peaceful uses, to gain the know-how to make electric power profitably from the atom. There are serious doubts that the first objective is being achieved. The second still lies in the future, so far as this country is concerned. Representative Carl Durham, Democrat of North Carolina, chairman of the Joint House-Senate Committee on Atomic Energy, returned this fall from an inspection tour of European nuclear power plants and told a meeting of scientists and engineers the headline story of the Russian satellite knocked into a cocked hat any thought of settling for the status quo in atomic energy developments. The communist Sputnik brings back into focus what we on the Joint Committee have often said should be our overriding objective: to maintain our world leadership. We have to get on with the job of getting large-scale atomic plants built and operating. In that way, we can maintain real leadership. This raises the question, of course, as to who is going to build and operate such large-scale reactors, government or private industry. Under the chairmanship of Lewis L. Strauss, the task of carrying out the U.S. policy has been delegated to the Atomic Energy Commission, primarily to private industry. In amending the 1946 Atomic Energy Act, the Republican-controlled 83rd Congress in 1954 opened the door to development of nuclear power by industry. Congress declared the policy of the United States in the field of nuclear electric power should be directed as to promote world peace, improve the general welfare, increase the standard of living, and strengthen free competition in private enterprise. Repeatedly, Strauss and AEC Commissioner Harold S. Vance have stressed the words private enterprise, but there have been grumblings in Congress, especially by Democrats, that industry was not getting on with the job properly. In 1956, the Democrats made a strong effort to appropriate $400 million for large-scale reactor development. Pressure from the administration, particularly Strauss, killed the proposal. Today, there is only one power-producing reactor plant in the nation, which is wholly owned and operated by private industry. The 5,000 kilowatt producer at Pleasanton, California, of General Electric and Pacific Gas and Electric Company. In dedicating the small plant, Strauss said it was an irrefutable answer to those who contend that American industry cannot be entrusted with major responsibilities in the development of nuclear power. Other reactors are producing power for civilian use. There is a 6,500 kilowatt plant owned by AEC at Santa Susana, California, from which the Southern California Edison Company gets electricity. An AEC spokesman denies that the AEC makes electricity, holding that we just sell the steam. Sorry, we just sell the steam? mark my disbelief. At Shippingport, Pennsylvania, there is a $110 million, 60,000 kilowatt plant almost wholly owned by the Atomic Energy Commission. Duquesne Light and Power Company, which distributes the electricity, contributed $5 million to the cost. Let's see, two other small, the Argonne National Laboratory near Chicago, Illinois, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee installation. In brief, the United States is producing 81,500 kilowatts. Oh. And they're building more. Once again, we're running into Senator Albert Gore of Tennessee, which is Albert Gore Sr., who we ran into in some of our nuclear power research earlier in the year. So this is about power plants. We're still not finding anything particularly about precisely where this ties into the ship. So we've got a couple more documents, and if we don't find it, I'm gonna move on to other things. But letter by Lewis L. Strauss, Chairman, U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. Possibly this will be somewhat promising. For release in papers of Sunday, May 4th, 1958, Chairman Strauss today made the following letter to the made public. I missed a word. The following letter to the Honorable Carl T. Durham. Dear Mr. Chairman, the newspapers are pressing me to know whether the several charges made by Senator Anderson in the course of the television broadcast on Sunday, April 27th are true or false, bear heavily upon me personally as a servant of the government. In the course of the program, the senator referred to the United States weapons tests, and according to the transcript stated, we don't get any real announcements of the purpose of most of these tests. He then asked, what do you mean you don't get any real announcements? Isn't that the purpose of your committee, to find out what is going on? To this, the senator is recorded as replying, we get a list, but the purpose of the test comes to us in the evaluation after the test. Okay, interesting. This is weapons. Weapons are less interesting for our purpose. I found a reference. In the course of the same broadcast, the senator is quoted as stating that, quote, the military have, quote, pulled bombs out of the stockpile and inserted something which makes it dirtier. The facts are that atomic bombs are only taken from stockpile for purposes of routine inspection or for modification or improvement. No material is inserted in bombs for the purpose of increasing the amount of fission products or to add to the total fallout. The President and the Department of Defense have already dealt with this subject in public statements, and I need not further elaborate. In the course of the same broadcast, the senator is recorded as stating, quote, what has happened to Atoms for Peace? You don't hear a word about it anymore. Well, I'll agree, because we've been digging through this folder for a little bit now and haven't really learned much about what it was. The facts are, as I'm sure you know, Mr. Chairman, that there has been a steady flow of reports and communications to your committee, all indicating the vigor and vitality of the Atoms for Peace program. The statutory report submitted by the Commission in February and the quarterly status report submitted in March, both reports that great gains made in the international development of the atom for peaceful purposes. In addition, during the 4 months that Congress has been in session, the committee has been informed of licenses issued or to be issued for the export of research and test reactors to Italy, Venezuela, the Netherlands, Sweden, Belgium, and Switzerland. The the sale of heavy water to Australia, the presentation of atomic energy libraries to several countries, the sending of missions and teams of experts to various friendly nations, the contribution of two mobile radio isotope laboratories to the International Atomic Energy Agency, and many other events, current or planned, such as the Second International Conference on the Peaceful Uses of Atomic Energy to be held in Geneva in September, all of them directly a part of the Atoms for Peace program. I believe we have documents related to that conference in one of the other collections that we've looked at during high energy physics programs. I don't know that we specifically looked at those documents, but I believe there are some. The program of Atoms for Peace is a most significant and growing contribution which our country has initiated in the interest of better relations in the world. Its disparagement is not justified by the facts. Okay, great. I want to learn more. Going back 1 month before that, AEC will, this is April 25th, 1958, AEC will provide research reactor fuel enrichment of more than 20% U-235 for friendly nations. Strauss, chairman of the US AEC, today announced a liberalization of the conditions under which uranium reactor fuel enriched to more than 20% in the isotope U-235 may be made available to friendly nations under the Atoms for Peace program. The new policy is designed to make more flexible the cooperation of the United States with those nations developing peaceful nuclear training, research, and power programs by extending the availability of highly enriched fuel to research reactors. The Commission also will consider requests from cooperating nations for enriched fuel for more than one materials testing reactor. Let's see, 9 comprehensive agreements, requests. So, April of 1958, they started opening up availability of fissionable material. Gotta love that. There's glue residue. International topical conferences. Trying to find, all of this is relevant, it's just not informative about, like, specifically how it relates. The Atoms for Peace mission has been postponed. That was October of 1957. We're going back in time, so to visit Latin America. I'm doing quick scanning right now to see if it's something that we should pause and read through. It's all interesting, it's just, I want to make sure that we focus on the boat as much as possible. Maybe this will help. July 3rd, 1957, the White House, statement by the president, since it was the statement by Eisenhower that created this program. Although this is not the initial statement, but let's see. I don't know if that's in here. In my statement on February 22nd, 1956, announcing the designation of 40,000 kilograms of uranium-235 for research and development purposes and for fueling nuclear power reactors at home and abroad, I stated that the Atomic Energy Commission would recommend that more supplies be made available for sale or lease as necessary in the future for additional nuclear power projects. So many red marks, it looks like it was being graded and had issues. I agree. I don't know. I mean, I assume those marks were made by Landis. This was 57, so Landis would have been assistant manager of the Atomic Energy Division for Babcock and Wilcox. And it looks like he's specifically interested in the amount of U-235 as well as the monetary value figures based on what's underlined. At the recommendation of the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, in which the Secretaries of State and Defense concur, I have determined under Section 41B of the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 that 59,800 kilograms of uranium-235, in addition to the previous allocations, may be made available for peaceful uses at home and abroad under conditions prescribed by the United States government. The additional quantities of U-235, which will be made available for distribution over a period of years, are 30,000 kilograms in the U.S. through lease for all licensed civilian purposes, principally for power reactors, 29,800 kilograms outside the U.S. through sale or lease to governments of individual nations or to groups of nations with which the United States concludes agreements for cooperation. Distribution of special nuclear material will be subject to prudent safeguards against diversion of the materials to non-peaceful purposes. Added to the 40,000 kilograms of uranium-235 designated on February 22, 1956, and the 200 kilograms designated earlier, this designation brings to 100,000 kilograms the total amount of this material to be made available as required for peaceful purposes, divided equally between domestic and foreign uses. At current prices established by the Atomic Energy Commission last November, the value of 100,000 kilograms of uranium-235 to be sold or leased is about $1.7 billion. I am gratified that the advance toward power and knowledge from the atom is proceeding at a pace which requires provision of additional supplies of the basic atomic fuel. Further details concerning the new determinations of availability of U-235 are set forth in the attached statement by the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. Commission's recommendation is due to the progress of nuclear power development. The point has been reached where licenses granted or under consideration by the Commission for nuclear power plants in the United States require more than the initial allotment. I wonder if the initial statement is in here somewhere, because that would be possibly the most useful thing we could find. Japanese research sector, Portuguese research reactor, Venezuelan research reactor. Anyway, Atoms for Peace was a program that, from what I can tell, it was a piece of string. It was like something flew off down onto was intended to encourage development of nuclear power for peaceful applications, such as civilian ships, which was the whole reason I was looking at this folder in the first place. They seem to just assume that everybody knows all the details about what this program is in all of these articles, which, is fine. I could get a primer somewhere, there's documentation of this program online. I was just looking for the primary sources. Niels Bohr wins Ford Fund Prize, 75,000 Atoms for Peace Award. So maybe this will give us something. By Earl Ubel. Dr. Niels Bohr, 72-year-old Danish physicist who deduced the shape of the atom, won yesterday the first $75,000 Atoms for Peace Award, the world's largest scientific prize. The award was established at the suggestion of President Eisenhower by the Ford Motor Company Fund as a memorial to Henry and Edsel Ford, and will be given each year for 10 years. In a telegram to the award fund's trustees, President Eisenhower said, "Seldom has a man dedicated himself more single-mindedly to the search of knowledge for the benefit of mankind than has Dr. Bohr in his half-century as a scientist and a teacher." Dr. James R. Killian, chairman of the award trustees, said he has spoken to Dr. Bohr in Copenhagen, where he heads his country's atomic program. Quote, "He was surprised and taken aback, but he is so modest that he could hardly say anything," unquote, said Dr. Killian said. Dr. Killian, president of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, said the selection committee was unanimous in its choice of Dr. Bohr out of 75 nominations. There's a picture of Bohr. From 23 countries. The announcement was made at the Carnegie Endowment International Center. Formal presentation made in Cambridge, Mass. Next summer. The gift is more than twice as big as the Nobel Prize and is $25,000 more than the U.S. government's Enrico Fermi Award. Dr. Killian said he didn't know if the prize was tax-free in Denmark. In addition to Dr. Bohr's work in theoretical physics, Dr. Bohr was the, quote, patron saint, unquote, of the Los Alamos atom bomb laboratory during the war. With a wartime alias of Nicholas Baker, Uncle Nick to the other scientists, he led the world's top physicists through the morass of the new atomic physics. Dr. Bohr saw evil in the bomb, but he believed it had to be made, for he saw the greater evil of Nazism in his native land, then overrun by Germans. Of Jewish stock, he had barely escaped Denmark, bearing with him his vast knowledge of the inner workings of the atom. So apparently there was an award. Still didn't give us a lot of details on specifics of the program. Possibly. That one might give us what we need. I don't know. Okay, here's one. This one might help us. It's also nearly the last thing in the folder, so we won't be on this for much longer. But some of the documentation that we saw last month said that this ship would not have been built without this program. And it's one of the first folders in the materials. So, for release Thursday, January 5th, 1956. I find it incredibly, I know it's silly. The stamp, they forgot to change the year, so it says January 6th, 1955, everybody does it. But anyway, New York, New York. The complete story of President Eisenhower's crusade to implement his Atoms for Peace program in the face of opposition by chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Lewis Strauss, and dissenting Republican members of Congress was revealed for the first time today in The Reporter magazine. In a copyrighted article, Ike and the Peaceful Atom, John Lear details the history of the president's 1953 proposal before the United Nations, in which he suggested an international atomic bank of uranium to be taken from A-bomb stockpiles for peaceful use by have-not nations. We saw that part at least, and we did read part of that John Lear article. It just seemed to be a lot more background info than specifics about the program. He also reveals how this major policy statement was written, mimeographed, collated, and stapled in the president's plane by top government officials during a 3.5-hour flight from Bermuda to New York. Lear relates that the president, refusing to be frustrated in a plan that had captured the imagination and friendship of the world, finally enlisted the help of Moorhead Patterson, New York industrialist, and Nelson Rockefeller. To these two, he said, quote, "Get this thing off dead center and keep it off," unquote. The details of the development of the Atoms for Peace plan make up a case history of successful American improvisation against communist threat and duplicity, the triumph of American initiative over American caution, and the growth of American idealism from the roots of American practicality, Lear writes. The plan was originally conceived and set down in a memo from the president to Strauss in August 1953. Today, according to Lear, Strauss will neither confirm nor deny that he ever received the president's memo. The truth may be that Strauss would have preferred never to have seen the memo. Lear writes, his wariness concerning all atomic dealings with foreign nations was a matter of record. The memo, according to Lear, reads something like this, quote, "I have been thinking about this atom business, and it seems to me there ought to be some way for us to give a certain amount of uranium to some kind of international agency that might be set up for the purpose. We couldn't give much at first without scaring our own people, but it should be enough to show the have-not peoples of the world that we sincerely want to develop the atom in a peaceful, friendly way. What are the technical problems we would have to work out in order to do this?" According to information obtained from Presidential Press Secretary James C. Hagerty, Lear reports, Strauss did not reply to the president, pointing out the limitations imposed by the Atomic Energy Act and the need to consult Congress. According to the 1946 Atomic Energy Act, the Atomic Energy Commission shall not, quote, distribute any fissionable material to any foreign government, ... Strauss then passed on the gist of the Eisenhower memo to C.D. Jackson, then special advisor to the president, to work out the details. According to Lear, Jackson wrote between 12 and 14 final drafts before he could satisfy Strauss, the State Department, and the Defense Department. He adds that a great deal of what Mr. Eisenhower wanted to say was eliminated in this process. What or why, no one is willing to divulge. There is a widespread conviction in Washington, Lear says, that during this period, Strauss did his best to kill the bank concept, or at least render it innocuous. Both Jackson and Hagerty deny this, using the same cryptic phrase, Strauss only pointed out the objections. Having decided to present the plan from the forum of the United Nations General Assembly, the president first discussed some aspects of it with Sir Winston Churchill at the Bermuda Conference of December 1953. Lear reveals that when the president left Bermuda only 4 hours before he was due to appear before the UN Assembly, his speech had not been completed. Lear tells the following dramatic story of how the speech was written and mimeographed aboard the plane by the president and his top advisors. Press Secretary Hagerty had included in the Columbine's equipment a hand-operated mimeograph and 2 electric typewriters. One of the typewriters was to cut mimeograph stencils, the other was jumbo, which has a large typeface the president uses when making a speech. The plane carried Mr. Eisenhower, Secretary of State Dulles, Strauss, Jackson, 3 secretaries, an Army staff sergeant who worked the mimeograph machine, and Secret Service guards. Between the typewriters and the mimeograph at the front of the president's compartment were 2 tables surrounded by swivel chairs, Lear writes. At one of these sat the president with Dulles, Strauss, and Jackson, all working furiously on the last draft of the manuscript. Jackson wrote, Dulles edited, Strauss objected. Eisenhower chose the word that sounded the best to him. Page by page, the copy passed to Haggerty, and Haggerty, after reading the insertions and deletions from a newspaperman's point of view, passed the copy page by page to the secretaries. ... Quote, there wasn't a quiet spot on that plane all the way from Bermuda to New York. Haggerty, going in one direction, would pass the Secret Service guards going the other way, lugging the copies from the whirling duplicator to the Columbine's front compartment behind the pilot's cabin, there to be stacked in proper order on 2 long tables. The Columbine arrived over New York, with the assembly line inside it still running full tilt. The pilot had to circle for 15 minutes and then taxi slowly on the runway after he landed so that the job could be finished. Even as the plane was rolling to a stop, the president underlined on his jumbo copy the words he wanted to emphasize. As he jabbed his pencil here and there, the Secretary of State, the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, and 2 special assistants to the president collated and stapled together 350 9-page sets of the mimeographed copies for distribution to the press at the airport. The ink was still wet on the paper when the 150 remaining copies, not yet collated or stapled, were bundled with the wet stencils into a waiting limousine, summoned from aloft by Haggerty on the Columbine's telephone, to be raced over back streets into Manhattan while the president followed a motorcycle escort along the parkways, sirens screaming. Unquote. Lear points out that although the president presented the Atoms for Peace plan cautiously, the, quote, long string of careful qualifications vanished from the delegates' minds, and the ifs and buts were forgotten in the organ swell of lofty purpose behind the president's proposed Atoms for Peace agency, unquote. The speech was followed by puzzling silence, ultimately revealed as part of the Soviets' delaying tactics. Quote, while the communists maneuvered to avoid the honest understanding sought by the president, the isolationist bloc of the Republican Party in Congress did its bit to nullify any agreement that Eisenhower might succeed in reaching, unquote, Lear reports. The president offered a detailed American plan for an atom bank, with an autonomous directorate reporting to the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. The bank would maintain its own facilities for storing and distributing uranium, disseminate information, enforce health and safety regulations, and operate its own laboratories, technical schools, and plants for the fabrication and processing of atomic fuel. This plan was rejected by Russia. Instead of postponing action until a specific atom bank agreement was ready for approval, as the White House a message of February had requested, Republican Senators John Bricker of Ohio and Bork Hickenlooper of Iowa injected their personal prejudices into the new Atomic Energy Act, Lear writes. As members of the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy, they were able to swing that strategic group away from the sympathy Representative Cole, chairman of the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy, had expressed toward the president's objective. Lots of politicians' names. There was a proposal. It was blocked. The president's atom bank idea was almost dead when it reached the 1954 UN Assembly, Lear says, adding that publication of the exchange of diplomatic notes exposed the retreat the Republicans had made from the president's original generosity. In place of the autonomous, business-like bank that Washington had offered to support in March, Lear writes, what was now being proposed was more like a brokerage house with no operating facilities, empowered only to arrange and approve direct bilateral dealings between the world's uranium haves and have-nots. The president at this point enlisted two new recruits, Moorhead Patterson and Nelson Rockefeller, to get the Atoms for Peace crusade off dead center, Lear reports. Both men, Lear says, worked with record-smashing speed to negotiate and carry out bilateral agreements implementing the president's program. Strauss, however, resented Patterson's activity, Lear reports. Soon, however, he says, the Eisenhower spirit dominated the Washington scene so unmistakably that it swept up Strauss before he knew what was happening. The U.S., thanks largely to President Eisenhower's continuing initiative, has agreed to submit the charter of the Atomic Brokerage House to a special convention in 1956 of UN members. There are indications that the U.S. draft of a charter may, after all, provide for a true atom bank with practical working facilities of its own. There are also signs, Lear says, that the president will ask Congress for specific approval for sharing information that, quote, would make the peaceful atom an even more decisive force than he had originally contemplated, the binding element of a politically united Europe, unquote. If the program is to move in this direction, Lear says, someone will have to keep pushing it. The president's two best atomic expediters, Patterson and Rockefeller, have left the government. Lear asks, will Strauss pick up the challenge, or will Eisenhower remain merely within sight of the objective of what has been his greatest crusade as president? So, yeah. 1955, there was a Atoms for Peace postage stamp to find the way by which the inventiveness of man shall be consecrated to his life. I still am not sure that I'm fully clear on all aspects of the plan, but essentially, it was a big push by Eisenhower to show that atomic energy and nuclear power could be used for peace, since it was introduced to the world as a bomb. And one of the things that this program ultimately led to was the nuclear ship Savannah, which was a civilian ship rather than a military vessel, but run by an atomic engine. So, we read a little bit about it last month, and we had fun with the press kit. But I have a couple of things here that I saw that looked particularly interesting. The world's reactors. As with everything, I put a little flag in it that said, hey, this might be interesting, but I haven't really looked at it. I just saw it and I was like, hey, that could be cool. And that's the extent of my knowledge. Which is why it took us so long to find what we found on the Atoms for Peace thing. I was like, oh, Atoms for Peace, what is that? I did a quick Google and was like, oh yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. And then we got bogged down. My apologies. Okay. This is a really big poster. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. And you might see a little bit behind the scenes. Because the widest angle, you'll be able to see a lot. But the world's reactors. Number 28, NS Savannah. So let's type thermal heterogeneous power. Purpose, marine propulsion experiment. Experiment, that's important. The Savannah was the first, but it was built as a proof of concept. It was built as an experimental ship. It was built to be, to identify problems and improve on them. So it's a cargo/passenger liner with a gigantic nuclear reactor that like sits dead center right in front of the bridge and spans basically the entire height of the ship. But there was also a window so that people could see the nuclear reactor, because if they had passengers on board, they wanted them to be able to see the reactor because it was a curiosity. Owner, U.S. Maritime Administration. Main contractor, Babcock and Wilcox Company, the company that Landis, whose papers these are, worked for. Design, 74 megawatt normal, 63.5 megawatt, MCR, 69 megawatt. I don't know what MCR stands for. So the design capacity is 74 megawatts. Normal operation is 63.5 megawatts. MCR, minimum critical reaction? Maximum? I don't know. I'm gonna find out. If I can. MCR, major component replacement. No, I don't think that's probably correct. I don't know. And no, it doesn't stand for My Chemical Romance. Thank you. I love it when there's a puzzle. MCR main control room, but again, MCR of 69 megawatts, that doesn't track. I don't know what that abbreviation is being used for in this case. When I look up MCR with relation to nuclear power plants or nuclear power generators, it says main control room. But you wouldn't have a megawatts rating for the main control room, so I don't know. I'm not gonna spend forever looking though. Let's see, fuel is enriched uranium oxide. The core is a cruciform prism composed of 32 channels. It's a square of circular tubes that we saw last month. Anyway, so a lovely little sort of diagram. This is part of a series of things, a series of like these little pamphlet-y booklet things. Looks like from Temple Press Limited. This is dated 1960. With these nice drawings of nuclear reactors. So in this case, the nuclear ship Savannah is depicted. You've got an illustration of it here, and then up in front you've got it's flipped and then cutouts so you can see inside. The passenger and cargo decks you never really see behind here. The bridge deck is up here. There's passenger and cargo decks along here. There's a whole shopping promenade and things like that, a swimming pool. And then you've got the engineering decks. And so you've got all of this. This is like the 30s and 40s range of numbers. So it's things like turbines and steam separators, the main condenser, and then where it connects into the propeller shaft to actually drive the ship. And then the nuclear reactor itself is this circular item. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. I thought it was an interesting looking, it's like a poster. You could, if you were a kid really interested in nuclear reactors, they had a whole series of these, and you could pin them up on your wall or something. All right. Now I can zoom back in. Nuclear developments. The Babcock and Wilcox Company, 350,000 miles on one tank of gas. Not really gas, but... And then, of course, you've got the Savannah, featured spanning the entire world. When is this from? It's 1959 for sure. I'm not 100% certain on what month, because I don't know the specific printing coding that they've got, but it's pretty clear it's 1959. Down to the sea in nuclear ships. The nuclear ship Savannah went down to the sea on July 21st, 1959, when the sleek 22,000-ton vessel was launched by Mrs. Dwight D. Eisenhower. The Savannah will be a goodwill envoy, a floating laboratory, and an unprecedented pioneer in marine propulsion. On a single fuel loading, she is capable of steaming the equivalent of 14 times around the world, demonstrating to all our determination to apply to peaceful uses the immense power of the atom. Babcock and Wilcox is frankly proud of having been selected as prime contractor for the design and supply of the entire nuclear propulsion system of this ship, and pleased also to have been selected to train the engineering and administrative officers who will crew her. Yes, I switched that word. From idea to accomplishment, the major steam generating equipment, the reactor core, pressurizer, reactor vessel, heat exchangers, and connecting piping are undertakings worthy of Babcock and Wilcox's 80-year history of leadership in the field of merchant marine and naval propulsion. Progress on this peace ship has been rapid. The entire reactor system, except the core itself, has been installed in the Savannah's hull, and her two-zoned core is presently being manufactured at Babcock & Wilcox's Lynchburg, Virginia nuclear facilities plant. The ship is 596 feet long, 78 feet wide, and will carry 10,000 tons of cargo and 60 passengers at a respectable 21 knots. The weight and space requirements of her nuclear power plant compare favorably with those of the power plant and fuel storage of conventionally powered ships, and her 35,000-mile range puts the Savannah in a class by herself. She has demonstrated her value as a seagoing laboratory, even before launching. Improvements suggested by the development of the Savannah's nuclear system have already resulted in improved preliminary designs for subsequent ships. But there is still a great deal to be learned from the construction and operation of this ship. Its contributions to nuclear propulsion technology have just begun. Equally important will be its contribution to our international prestige and goodwill. The benefits and technology associated with the NS Savannah are being made available to the other free nations of the world. Our hats are off to President Eisenhower, who first suggested this peace ship, and to the Atomic Energy Commission, the Maritime Administration, and the leading American industrial companies who are helping us make her a reality. A pressurized water reactor, slightly enriched uranium oxide in stainless steel tubes is the fuel. Maximum shaft horsepower, 22,000. Primary system pressure, 1750 psia. Pounds per square inch. I don't know what the A means. I'm familiar with PSI. PSI is pounds per square inch. PSIA is pounds per square inch absolute. Absolute pressure is measured relative to a full vacuum. The other version being PSIG, which is gauge pressure, which is pressure measured relative to ambient atmospheric pressure. Got it. So this is measured against vacuum. Average coolant temperature of 508 Fahrenheit. I don't know why, but that seems really hot. The average coolant temperature is 508 degrees Fahrenheit. Reactor power, 69 megawatts. That's the coolant temperature? Wow. Available literature. I don't know if all of these are in this collection. We could potentially dig. I don't know how successful we would be, but come on, zoom in. No, don't. It has decided to time out and not give me control of the camera. One moment while I reload the camera controls. Maybe. Assuming the internet is still working. Other items available. Babcock & Wilcox swimming pool reactors. Swimming pool reactors? The power plant for the first nuclear merchant ship, NS Savannah. Fuel elements. I have no camera control right now. Spectral shift, control of pressurized water reactors, and B&W nuclear power development. Oh, see, this is why I wanted to zoom in, because I wanted to know more about this swimming pool reactors thing. And from the cover, I begin to understand. The rods are thrusting down into what's essentially like a basin full of liquid, thereby swimming pool reactors. Let's see. This one is just some stapled together papers, just titled History. It is the history of at least the nuclear reactor, it looks like. So, proposed by President, April 1955, approved by Congress, July 1956, selection of Babcock and Wilcox, October 1956, selection of, it looks like, some key personnel in 57. The keel was laid May 1958, and it was launched July 1959. Component testing started July 1960, systems testing November 1960. ACRS. Fueling approval January 1961. Public hearing April 1961. Atomic Energy Commission fueling authorization in July of 1961. Pre-fueling testing September of 1961. And then in November, they finally fueled the reactor, reaching initial criticality in December of 1961. 10% of the testing was completed in January of 62. And 2 months later, the initial sea trial. Looks like delivery to the operating company in May of 62. With official authorization for operations from the Atomic Energy Commission in August of 62. And its initial voyage was completed in February of 63. Cool. Reactor startup and sea trials, April 63. Cancellation, May 1963. New staff formation, begin instructor training, select new GA, possibly general administrator? I don't know. Begin crew training. Huh. And there's some stats. Okay. The ship had total displacement of 20,000 tons. Light displacement, putting it at 14,000 tons. 596 feet long. 78 feet beam, draft of 29 feet. 20,000 SHP. SHP. I don't know what SHP, something horsepower. We could look that up, I guess. Speed of 21 knots, 60 passengers. Expected life of the core, 6 years. Overall cost, $55 million. Hi, Key Squared. Welcome, Key Squared. It has indeed been a hectic day. Also, 16-Bit Eric is raiding on the Rogan 27 channel with a party of 4. Hello, 16-Bit Eric. Welcome, everybody. It is great to have you joining us for Archival Adventures today. I hope that Baldur's Gate 3 was treating you well. Adventures of Tony, hello. Hi, Baba Yeeha. Welcome, everybody, to Archival Adventures. If this is your first time here, I'm Anthony Wright de Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech, and this is a show I do once a week on both the library's channel and my personal channel, twitch.tv/VTUL Studios and twitch.tv/Rogan27, where I share materials from archives and special collections, and we get to explore things together. It's very much like an unboxing of stuff from our archives, because most of the time I've never seen the things before. Blue Rooster 2112, welcome, hello. And yes, if we could shout out 16-Bit Eric, anybody who was here and doesn't already follow Eric. Eric is a wonderful streamer, has a wonderful community, does a lot of tabletop role-playing game content, and is very knowledgeable about that industry. Just a wonderful, wonderful human being with a great community, and it's definitely worth a follow. You all coming in was my cue to take a sip of water. Is it Slash? Ha! I have successfully done it myself. And yes, anybody over on the VTUL Studios channel, since Eric raids this show somewhat often, if you all want to give a follow over there too, there you go, quick and easy. So today is the last Wednesday of the month, and the last Wednesday of the month in 2023, we have been doing a special series on the topic of high energy physics, where I track down collections that we have related to nuclear power, atomic energy, etc. And the end of July, we looked through the press kit for nuclear ship Savannah, the first atom-powered merchant ship that launched on July 21st, 1959. But the papers I have are from the person who was the assistant manager of the Atomic Energy Department at Babcock and Wilcox when they were designing and building the nuclear reactor that powered the ship. And I felt like the press kit wasn't enough, and that we should look at more stuff. So we're looking at more stuff about the nuclear ship Savannah today. We just came across these typed out documents where there's a little bit of a history, some stats about the ship. Objectives of nuclear ship Savannah. 1. To demonstrate advanced technology and peaceful use of nuclear energy for U.S. prestige. 2. To physically create the conditions necessary to force resolution of unknown or unestablished areas. I have no idea what that sentence means. Nope, no idea. Force resolution of unknown or unestablished areas. That I am unclear on. 3, to provide a working test bed or laboratory to be used as a tool in creating advanced ships. Number 3 seems to be the objective that they ended up focusing the most on. 4, to establish acceptable standards in A, design of ship and reactor, B, operating practices, C, crewing the ship, D, port entry and operation, E, safety of crew, passengers, and general public. 5, to establish necessary insurance and legal means by which foreign ports could be entered, and 6, to establish acceptance by passengers, authorities, and general public, as well as cargo shippers. And I'm going to throw it in here because I don't know that I have seen it in chat yet today. And there have been a couple times where I have swapped out words that are defaulting to male pronouns in describing a generalization of people. Like here, where I changed it to crewing. And, you know, these are historical documents. Go figure, I missed the ride again because customers came in. It's, hey, I am thrilled if somehow me going live and your desire to hang out during the stream means that customers come in and you don't get to hang out during the stream, because that means you're getting customers. I am thrilled to have my luck bring you customers. The Savannah accomplishments: established necessary design functions, established one acceptable means for performing the functions, established, port operating procedures, availability of insurance and pattern of foreign third-party liability coverage, nuclear, acceptance by passengers, port authorities, and general public, regulatory procedures and inspection standards and training requirements, crewing to be a direct function of ship layout and service, acceptable standards for safety of passengers, workers, and general public, the creation of 3 vastly improved nuclear power plants, which can offer substantial benefits to the maritime industry. Interesting, okay. The high degree of reliability and performance of nuclear power, the means by which very high performance commercial ships can be achieved. Okay. Labor climate, engineering future schedule, relationships. Okay. I think most interesting here was the objectives. What were they trying to achieve with this ship? I thought that was overall pretty useful to have. What's next? What's next? I have lost my place. I need to slot a couple of these back in, otherwise I will lose track of where I got them from. And for archival purposes, we like to not change the order that things were in. Savannah Saga, $1. 1819 to 1962, another era of the seas opens in Savannah with the first official port visit, the first visit to home port by the world's first nuclear-powered merchant ship. This is an interesting illustration. The time is now 4:20 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and the stream is coming to an end. Please prepare to head out to various regions of the world. Thank you, Hannah, for the notification in chat there that we're approaching the scheduled end time. So the nuclear ship was named Savannah after an Age of Sail ship. And so this illustration is really interesting to me because you've got the Age of Sail ship sort of like a ghost of the Age of Sail ship next to the nuclear ship. It's really neat. About the cover and Savannah Saga. The illustration on the cover of this publication is a cropped, reduced version of a 1959 painting by Frederick J. Hertz, widely known artist of Atlanta. I think it's Hertz, but I'm not certain. Mr. Hertz was commissioned by the Atlanta newspaper Newspapers Incorporated to do the painting, and a full-color reproduction of it was first seen on the cover of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Sunday magazine on July 17, 1959, 2 days prior to the launching of the NS Savannah at Camden, New Jersey. With the phantom image of the SS Savannah, first transoceanic steamship, painted against the image of the resplendent NS Savannah, a saga is indeed reflected, a saga for Savannah, Georgia, concerning ships bearing the name of this famous old, proud, thriving, and ever-growing port city. On August 22, 1818, the epoch-making SS Savannah was launched. August 22, 1962 was set as the date for the important, glamorous NS Savannah to tie up for her first official port visit, her first visit to home port, her formal entry to service, and her official receipt of papers from Mrs. Marion Faircloth Baker, U.S. Collector of Customs, Savannah, certifying the NS Savannah as being a Savannah-based ship of the seas. Savannians, proud of their heritage and their famous city's colorful history, are proud that this vessel is their ship. It links the significant sailing of the first transoceanic steamship from this port, marking a new era of the seas, with a comparable occasion, the opening of another era of the seas, nuclear propulsion for ships of commerce. Yeah, so this whole magazine is just like a history and like detailed breakdown of like the development of the ship. I'm not going to dig through because we don't really have time, but the illustration I thought was pretty iconic. It's it is clearly, very clearly, an age of sail ship, because it's got the masts, it's got everything, but it is the first steam-powered ship, first SS steamship to cross the Atlantic, and it was named Savannah. And then behind it, you've got the new innovation, the first civilian nuclear-powered ship, NS Savannah. Not quite 100 years apart, but significant in some way at least, right? There's a lot of other documents. I know we looked at some photographs last month, and as much as I would love to dig out more photographs, we don't really have that much time. But two quick things, and then I'll probably have to call it, because sometimes I can push it. Today I've had such a busy day, and I have some stuff to clean up before I can head home. So, the United States Department of Commerce, gateway to your future, the Maritime Administration. On the cover, the Savannah. So this is a recruiting thing for the Maritime Administration, which is Department of Commerce. The Maritime Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce, offers a challenging opportunity through its management intern program to resourceful young college or university graduates who have ability, imagination, enthusiasm, and integrity, because a strong merchant marine is essential to the economy of a powerful trading nation like the United States with its worldwide commitments. There is a constant need for new talent and therefore an opportunity for those with potential to progress. This brochure describes the nature of the work, carried on by the Maritime Administration and the opportunities offered by this program. And it gives like this entire like history of ocean transportation yesterday and today with nice little illustrations. It is, once again, I will say, a historic document. Although it's not I say this knowing that the people who put this together just said, oh, it's an Indian, they need a feather on their head. I don't know the historical accuracy of that type and shape of canoe being used by indigenous folk. Just from this little illustration, I have no idea. I don't personally know the cultural significance of the feather and which tribes specifically used the feather and whether they would have been rowing canoes shirtless like that. I'm unclear. It is a historic document. That image to me, I'm like, I feel like it's probably not accurate enough to not be a bit of a problem. But they're referencing small craft, human-powered small craft, which canoes were only one variety of. There are many different types of canoe-type vessels that were developed by various different indigenous cultures around the world. This is the one illustration they have. And then they've got like the Grand Age of Sail. It looks like they've got right. So they've got the canoe, they've got a clipper ship, the Revolutionary Steamboat Claremont, the steamship Savannah, the SS United States, which is a liner ship, this one being an American liner, but the liner ship you're probably most familiar with would be the Titanic, and then the nuclear ship Savannah. A historic document. Yes, Simsilica. The irony is that they probably thought they were being really progressive and inclusive by including it. Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know enough of the culture to know if all of those elements belong together. But I know it's problematic because I know the people who put it there never even considered whether all those elements belong together. And, yeah. Like, I have a feeling there's a possibility that all of them might combine in some of the Midwestern tribal nations, but I don't know for certain. What is the Maritime Administration? The Maritime Administration is an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce entrusted by the Congress with the task of aiding the development of an American merchant marine adequate to carry the nation's waterborne commerce during peacetime and capable of serving as a naval and military auxiliary in time of war or national emergency. The Maritime Administration is active in many fields in carrying out this program. Its operations are closely integrated one with another and are carried on in close cooperation with the shipping industry and with other federal agencies and departments, as well as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the other international organizations. Chief among the Maritime Administration's many activities are determining the most essential trade routes and services, supervising the design, construction, and performance of a continuing shipbuilding program for the American Merchant Marine, undertaking research and development in maritime fields, maintaining the Maritime National Defense Reserve fleets and shipyards, training officers for the American Merchant Marine. Yeah, so it's a recruitment brochure for the Maritime Administration. And it's here because it features multiple pictures of the Savannah. This is, we actually looked at this full document last month with the breakdown of the different decks and compartments on the Savannah. But yeah, I thought there are multiple copies of that in there, and they were pretty interesting. The last thing we're going to glance at, because we're technically over time, but I wanted to show it. It's one of the only things in here that has a binding, other than like actual printed books or like the magazine type things, printed magazine type things. This is the NS Savannah Safety Assessment, Volume 1. I don't actually know if there's a Volume 2 anywhere in the documents. If there is, it doesn't have a nice binding like this. NS Savannah Safety Assessment, Volume 1, Engineering and Construction. All the words, like the little gold filling the indentations, is very faded. So let's see. The Maritime Administration, Department of Commerce, United States Atomic Energy Commission, Washington, 25, DC. And it starts out with a lovely photo, or a lovely, it's not a photo, it's a piece of art. The nuclear ship Savannah, in color no less. Everything else we've looked at has been black and white, so, well, I think so. I will say, it's no longer on loan from the government of the United States, and it is no longer not for public release. If anybody wanted to come to Special Collections and University Archives here at Virginia Tech, we will happily pull this out and let you look through it. It is available for the public to see, hence being on stream. This volume describes the engineering and construction of the nuclear ship Savannah with special attention upon the safety features of her nuclear propulsion system. Subsequent volumes will deal with the operation and maintenance of the ship, environmental health factors, and analysis of possible casualties and the hazards involved. It was prepared in August 1960 for the Atomic Energy Commission and the Maritime Administration by the Babcock & Wilcox Company Atomic Energy Division. And it is, yeah, it goes through a lot of stuff. It is a full, like, safety assessment of this nuclear-powered ship. Gives some history. You'll note this is not, so I presume that this is a proof, just based on how it's bound, and it includes some fold-out maps and things like that. I don't know if the final product would have been put together quite this way, but there are segments where there are like blanked pages between. Actually, this entire front section is all fold-outs. So maybe this is what the final product is like. It's just many, many fold-outs. It struck me as interesting and neat, but also just like super information dense and worth like admiring as a piece of binding, like admiring it for its publication and how it was done, and wow, this is an interesting thing. If I knew tons about nuclear ship engines or ship engines and safety thereof, or nuclear reactors and safety thereof, it might be a really interesting thing to read through, but it's a lot of technical tables that will mean very little to me. So this is interesting. Photo by Babcock and Wilcox Company Boiler Division. Locating plate for reactor vessel head on 8,500-ton hydro press. It's the first photo I actually ran across that's in the printed materials. Removal of hemispherical head from hydro press. Anyway, I do sadly have to start winding us down. As I said at the beginning of the stream, this collection that we're looking at, these are the John W. Landis papers. Landis was, he worked for the U.S. Navy Department as a consultant on the topic of guided missiles in 46 to 50. Worked for Educational Testing Service in the late 40s, worked at the Atomic Energy Commission, and then for quite the length of his career, he was at Babcock and Wilcox Company, working in the field of nuclear engineering. And we have many boxes of his documents. The Savannah is only one of the topics covered by these papers. But I thought it was interesting, and I enjoyed exploring the Savannah, the papers about the Savannah. Coming up next week, on Wednesday, since Monday is Labor Day here in the United States, I will be visiting two collections related to Labor Day. They are two collections. I'm waiting for a file to open because I have forgotten specifically which union. Yes. I have two collections with papers about related to the Textile Workers Union of America. And so next week it is Union Week, as we look at materials from two collections about the Textile Workers Union of America in honor of Labor Day. And then I'm not 100% certain what comes up after that. Oh, yes. The next one after that, we'll have a new guest who's never guested on the program before. Archivist Bess will be joining me as we look at the papers that she has been working with recently. So those are things to look forward to. Let me look and see where we might possibly want to go on a raid journey. And let's see. Of course, there is Stephen Joyce. There's also, hey, wow. Oh yeah, we're gonna go. Wait, okay, anyway. I think we're gonna head on over to the Monterey Bay Aquarium today. The Monterey Bay Aquarium has presently the spider crab cam on. There is one crab that I see, but it's at the very edge. There's a fish swimming through, and a whale just swam by. So we'll have some underwater camera to accompany you to the end of your day. Wannabe Sayuri, it is great to see you. Sadly, we are about to raid away, but thank you for stopping by. I will be back with more Archival Adventures next Wednesday. Fragrance-free Vaseline. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully, I will see you again sometime for more random things as I unbox and see what's in some of our archival collections. The next Archival Adventures is next Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. As I said, we'll be looking at materials about the Textile Workers Union of America next week. So hopefully I will see some of you then. I love when I do like an outro and I'm not actually prepared to go to the ending scene. Anyway, enjoy the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Thank you all for stopping by. Until I see you next, keep enjoying history.